My name is Kandace. I'm the author of this book, The Story of Afro Hair, 5,000 Years of History, Fashion and Styles. But it's not actually my first book. It's probably my sixth or seventh book. I'm a children's author and I write books for children about Black history. And how I got into it about 12 years ago now was not because I thought I would be an author. It wasn't something that I set out to do. It wasn't something that I thought about doing when I was young. It came about literally because here I am in London, which used to be the center of a big empire that at one point included the United States, included Barbados, which is where my parents are from, where I lived part of my life. And when I went around, I would go into museums and I would see there was all of this history, lots and lots of Black history going back to ancient times, but I didn't see it in children's books. Whenever I looked at children's books, they just told the same history that I read when I was a child. And I was a child many years ago. Too many more years than I'd like to say. And I just thought, how is it possible that 40 years later, I'm still seeing the same books, reprinted, republished, but the same Black history that I saw when I was young? Had nothing changed since then? What about all the stuff in the museums? What about all the history? Has there been no research going on since then? And is this all that we are telling children? Is this all that we're saying Black history is? I also noticed that a lot of it began with enslavement, which I thought was strange because I thought, that's an important part of history, but it's not where the Black history started, and it's not the only part of Black history. So I just couldn't understand it. Why wasn't I seeing more about Black British history? There were Black people in Britain in Victorian times, Tudor times, Elizabethan times, Roman times. Didn't see any of that. Didn't see much ancient Black history. Didn't even see much modern Black history. And so that's how I got started. And I started out self-publishing. So I used to write the books, research, do everything right here in my flat where I am now. I put my second bedroom, my spare bedroom, into the warehouse where I would actually have the books delivered. I would store them there. I would distribute them there from there and do all of it. And it was really, really hard. When I started it, I didn't realize how hard it would be to try to write, research, sell, market, distribute. But I did it. And then last year, I decided to stop self-publishing and try to publish through a mainstream publisher where they could handle more of that stuff and I could concentrate more on the research and the writing. And that's how the journey has been. So the first book I did was a little activity book called Step Back in Time to Ancient Kush. At the time, I didn't have a lot to spend. So it's actually inside. It's all black and white. It's activities. So children learn the history through activities. So dot to dot, word searches, that type of thing. And the response was really good. Even though I hadn't done any marketing, even though I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of selling the book, I went to some events and people were so supportive. And they liked the book. It was about ancient Sudan, the kingdom of Kush, which not a lot of people knew about, but they still supported the book. And I actually printed this book twice. So that then gave me the confidence. And I realized, okay, if I keep doing it, people may support me. So then I did another book, which is called The Story of Ancient Egypt. So I did this one a couple of years later. And this time I was able to invest the money And this one now was in color. And I even could put in photos of some of the artifacts from ancient Egypt. And this was showing ancient Egypt in an African context. So using some of these artifacts that are just in the museums here, gathering dust, I was able to put that in. And it really just went on from there. Then I did another book called Secrets of the Afro Comb. And this was looking at Afro combs over 6,000 years of history. And this one was in 2013. And at the time, there was an exhibition called Origins of the Afro Comb, which was looking at Afro combs and other types of African combs from 6,000 years ago right up to modern times. And that is when I had the idea for this book, which has just come out, The Story of Afro Hair. Because when I did the book about the Afro combs and when I was part of the exhibition, people really liked the exhibition. We had about 30,000 visitors come, and they were people who were interested in history, they were interested in children's books, they were interested in Black authors, but they were also people who were interested in hair, because obviously part of having a comb is as a tool to groom the hair, part of it. And that's when I got the idea of having a book that was focused a bit more in on the hair. Because since then, we've seen many cases of children, both here in the UK and in the US, and in other places, including Ghana and Jamaica, getting in trouble, being expelled from school because of their natural hair. South Africa as well. I'd seen things like this happening. I also felt that when I looked at the children's books, I wasn't seeing enough explanation about why Afro hair is the way it is. So part of the reason that I write the books and why I focus on the history is because books for me, for children, should be about educating. It should be about combating ignorance. It should be about sharing information. And that information is available. It's not to say that this is being stuff that's being made up. This is information that is available. So why is it not being put into the books for children? And so that's where I got the idea of doing this book. So it was a book that I've wanted to do for many, many years, at least 8 years, I wanted to write this book. And the book is not about the hairstyles in the sense that it's not telling you how to cornrow or how to create locks or how to braid hair, but it's showing you hairstyles that have been fashionable over 5,000 years and explaining why they were fashionable and explaining the context behind the hairstyles. So it has ancient history, medieval history, as well as modern history. And it's got Black British history, which is often left out. It has African American history, and it also has African history going back to ancient Egypt, which many people forget because the ancient Egyptians wore hairstyles very similar to what people with Afro hair wear today. They wore twists, they wore locks. Yes, they did wear locks. They wore braided hair, they wore extensions, they wore almost all the styles that we see today. So I suppose the reason why you see the book a lot is because people seem to like it. They are helping to spread the word. I am now on Instagram, which I wasn't before. So I've started with Instagram as well. But a lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of it is explaining what you do to people, them seeing the book. And so far, the response seems quite good. I'm pleased that I made the decision to go with a mainstream publisher. I wouldn't have done that before. I self-published for 10 years. I was happy I did it, but I felt that now was the right time to make that change. And I also felt, could they do something a bit more than what I could do on my own? And so far, I've not been disappointed. The book is beautiful. It has the name, the title in gold foil. so that when the child sees the book, they know that this is a book about something important, something that is valuable. All the pages inside they've produced in color, which is again something I'm really happy about. They've also got beautiful illustrations by a Black British artist called Joelle Avellino. And I don't really know what I can say except it was a labor of love. I'm really happy that I was able to bring out this book. I'm going to be doing some more as well. I have a deal to write 3 more books. I'll be writing more. But yeah, this is the book. And I guess the best thing now is if people have questions. It's published in the UK. So part of the reason why you're probably seeing it so much is because all of the Black booksellers have been supporting the book. So you can get it from Book Dynasty, Book and Culture, Afro Books in Brighton. This is Book Love. They're all selling it here in the UK, promoting our heritage. They're all selling the book here. Of course, it's available on Amazon, but it's always good to support the Black booksellers. The independent bookshops, mainstream, have also been promoting the book, which is really good. So it did win, well, the word isn't a win, we say it was awarded Book of the Month in October. So it was available in all of the UK and Ireland's independent bookshops. Bit of a mouthful. So that was Indie Book of the Month, they call it. So I'm really pleased about that. Outside of the UK, the best place to get it is the Book Depository, which I'll put in the link, because they do free worldwide shipping. So even though it's good to support the Black booksellers and independent booksellers in the UK, if you're outside the UK, you will get it through the Book Depository, and that will give you free shipping. And my family in Barbados who ordered the book says that they get it very promptly and the service is really good.
Is there any marketing tips that you may have, or anything that you think that's worked well for you in terms of marketing? I know you've obviously had a traditional publisher, but what have you maybe recommend for some of the authors that are on the platform, particularly authors that maybe want to get more sales or authors that have just released a book?
So for me, although you've seen this one a lot, don't forget I have been doing books for more than a decade, and each one, you get better known with each one. So it's kind of built up. My number one marketing tip is actually write a good book. Because the book itself is what really counts. You can have really good marketing, but if the book isn't something that people like, it's only going to go so far, or it's only going to last so long. So my best tip is, first of all, think about the book when you're actually writing the book. Make the book the best you can be. Some people have said to me, oh, well, I want to do it, but I'm not going to put everything into this book. But if you don't put everything into the book and you hold back, how are people going to know what else you can do? When I wrote this book came about as a result of this book. And then when I did this book, The Story of the Windrush, this was the book that then led to me getting the book deal, which allowed me to do this book. So it grows. So I would say do the best book that you can do. Because like I said, even when I started, I didn't know anything about marketing. And the first book, people just liked it and they spread the word. And then even though I did everything wrong with marketing, it still grew from there. So I think start with the book itself. Good word of mouth, a good book, and you can't go wrong.
The next thing I want to ask is now getting into schools, because there may be people that have written books that want to get. I think the kind of books that you've written obviously are ideal for schools, particularly diverse. And how have you been able to get your books into schools? And if you could speak more on that process.
Yeah. Again, very, very difficult, especially in the beginning when I was self-publishing, because self-published books, sometimes people don't want to accept them as quickly as they would a book by a reputable publisher. So it is difficult. And that's why I think it's important to get the book done really well. Have it edited, have it proofread, have it fact checked. It really, because you can't expect a school to just take your book, because even if the book is about something that no one else is writing about, if it's not produced well, they can't take that in front of children when the parents will then turn around and complain. So that's why you still got to start with a good book, make it as good as you can. But then, if your book is good and you have had it fact checked, it does stand up, you can then start promoting it to teachers, and teachers will then tell other teachers. So, a couple of my self published books were used by teachers. And the first one was the original version of this one, The Story of the Windrush. And I think that was partly because the topic was quite timely. People were looking for Black history. There hadn't been, as far as I was aware, books for children like this about the Windrush, even though it's the point in which we start modern Black British history, right? Because yes, there were Black people in Britain before 1948, but most of us in Britain today are descended from people who came from 1948 onwards. And yet there was no book about that. So I think if you can get the right topic and you can try and do the book well, you can make sure it stands up, then you have more of a chance. But it is harder. Now that I'm being published by the mainstream, that's made it a lot easier, because the publisher that I'm with now, they have a relationship with teachers and librarians, which on my own would be a lot harder to do. So you need to kind of balance whether you're going to self-publish or go down the mainstream route. And if you want to get into schools, I think it's easier to do it through the mainstream, but it's not impossible.
What was the process like for you to get in a traditional publisher? Because some people, it's a very long, difficult process. And sometimes you could wait a whole year and still not get offered a contract by a traditional publisher. What was the process like for you in terms of obviously how they took on your first book initially and then went on to publish other books of yours?
Yeah. So the reason why the way I did it was I approached an agent, and then the agent approached the publisher. A lot of publishers don't want to hear direct from authors. Even when they say that they do, a lot of them don't. The way the industry works, it really is easier if you approach an agent. You explain to the agent what you want to do, and then the agent knows which publishers to approach. When I started, like I said, 12 years ago, I had no intention of going with a mainstream publisher. It didn't even enter my mind. But after, when I decided that I wanted to do that, then I went through an agent.
I've got someone who's asked a question. How do you find the agent?
So there is a book here in the UK, but I don't know if it's available in the US, but in the UK, there is a book. It's a red book. It comes out every year. I've forgotten the name, but it's got all the details of all the publishers and all the agents. So you can buy that book. But you can also Google and you can find the names of all the agents online. And then you look and you see what they do. For me, it's different because I write very specific books, children's books. So it's a narrower field than if you're writing, say, fiction. But there are different agents. And sometimes if you're also on social media, they will sometimes say, oh, they're looking for Black authors, they're looking for this, they're looking for that. So you have to do a little bit of research.
Okay, and the final thing I want to talk to you about now is again, has it helped you actually, your being a traditional publisher, with getting yourself into like media places? Because I've seen you in places like ITV. How has it worked? How has it, obviously, is that helped you? Have they been able to obviously get you those kind of breakthroughs in terms of getting on that mainstream media on television?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the ITV interview that you're thinking about was when I did The Story of the Windrush, but that was when I did it in 2018, and that was still a self-published book. So it wasn't because I was traditionally published, it was a self-published book that I got into that. So that's why I still believe that even if you are self-published, if you can do a really good book, build your following, and then if you want to, you can transition into traditional publishing. But you don't have to be traditionally published to get into the media. The media will still take self-published authors if the book is good, if people are talking about it. And that's what happened with The Story of the Windrush.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's Kandace Chimbiri.